It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind where the air bit just enough to sharpen your senses, and the leaves outside the university's grand auditorium glowed gold against a pale sky. The Ivy League Leadership Symposium was in full swing, an annual clash of intellects where America's brightest gathered to debate the future. Professors strutted like peacocks, students scribbled furiously, and luminaries watched from the wings. This year, an unexpected name graced the guest list: Donald J. Trump. Not here for politics, they said, but for his raw, unfiltered presence, a businessman who'd built empires. Whispers snaked through the crowd. Some sneered he didn't belong, a brash intruder in their hallowed halls. Others buzzed with curiosity, wondering what he'd say. The auditorium hummed with anticipation as Trump took his seat near the front, his sharp suit a stark contrast to the tweed and elbow patches around him. His face was calm, unreadable, a faint smirk tugging at his lips as he surveyed the room. Then the lights dimmed, and Dean Richard Hargrove strode onto the stage. A titan of academia, Hargrove was a silver-haired atheist with a voice that could slice through steel. He'd made his name shredding faith in lecture halls, turning God into a punchline for eager students. Adjusting his tie, he scanned the crowd with a predator's gleam. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone thick with condescension. "Today we dissect the relics of thought, starting with the fairy tale of God." The screen behind him flared to life, a graph plunging downward, religiosity fading as education climbed. "Science leaves no room for myths," he declared, arms folding smugly. "The data's clear. The smarter you are, the less you cling to superstition." His eyes flicked to Trump, lingering just long enough to sting. "Maybe some here still clutch old traditions, habits too stubborn to die." A few chuckles rippled through the room, but the air tightened. Hargrove leaned forward, his smirk widening. "Tell me, Mr. Trump, how does a man like you square faith with reason? Or do you just like a good story?" The crowd held its breath, waiting for the stumble, but Trump didn't move, not yet. The auditorium hung in a tense hush, the weight of Dean Richard Hargrove's challenge pressing down like a storm cloud ready to burst. His words, "Tell me, Mr. Trump, how does a man like you square faith with reason?" still echoed, sharp and mocking, as the crowd waited for Donald Trump to falter. The screen behind Hargrove glowed with its smug graph, a steep decline that sneered at faith, and the dean stood with arms folded, his silver hair catching the stage lights, a smirk plastered across his face. Students shifted in their seats, some stifling nervous giggles, others leaning forward, eager for the takedown they assumed was coming. Hargrove had spent decades perfecting this game, turning believers into punchlines, and he was sure he'd do it again. But Trump didn't flinch. He rose from his chair with the slow, deliberate grace of a man who'd faced bigger battles than this, buttoning his jacket as if preparing for a boardroom showdown. The murmurs grew louder, a ripple of surprise spreading through the room. He stepped toward the stage, his boots clicking against the polished floor, each sound a drumbeat in the silence. "Dean Hargrove," he began, his voice booming yet steady, slicing through the tension like a hot knife. "I'm happy to enlighten you. Believe me, it's going to be tremendous." A few chuckles broke the stillness, but Hargrove's smirk twitched, just enough to betray a flicker of unease. Trump turned to the audience, his presence swelling to fill the vast auditorium. "First off, I find it fascinating, really fascinating, that a guy who brags about reason thinks faith means you're dumb. That's not science, folks. That's arrogance, pure and simple." The room went quiet, the air thickening as Hargrove's eyes narrowed. Trump pointed at the screen. "You've got your little graph up there, showing smart people ditch God. Looks nice, I'll give you that, beautiful presentation. But let's talk facts, real facts. Some of the greatest minds ever, Newton, Einstein, brilliant people, believed in something bigger. Einstein said, 'Science without religion is lame.' Ever hear that one, Dean? Or are you too busy laughing at it to listen?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, a few students nodding, others scribbling furiously. Hargrove unfolded his arms, his jaw tightening, but Trump pressed on, undeterred. "Now your graph, it's a beauty, no question. But correlation isn't causation, folks. That's statistics 101. Something a dean should know, right? You'd think so, but when you're blinded by bias, you miss the basics. Happens to the best of us, well, not me, but some people. A wave of laughter rolled through the room, lightening the mood, but Trump's gaze stayed locked on Hargrove, unwavering. And let's get real about faith, he continued, stepping closer to the stage's edge, his voice rising with conviction. It takes guts, tremendous guts, to believe in something you can't see. Faith built this country, folks. Hardworking Americans, farmers, builders, winners, trusted in God and freedom. You think they were stupid? No, they were smart, smarter than some fancy professor with a chart. The audience buzzed, some clapping spontaneously, others exchanging wide-eyed glances. Hargrove scoffed, trying to regain control. Spare us the patriotism, Mr. Trump, he snapped, his tone sharp. Explain how your God fits with quantum physics or AI. Go ahead, dazzle us. Trump grinned, a flash of teeth that said he'd been waiting for this. Quantum physics? Oh, it's a mystery, Dean, a big, beautiful mystery even you can't figure out. Scientists, smart guys not like you, say the universe is fine-tuned, perfect for life. Random chance? I don't think so. Sounds like faith to me, better faith than yours. And AI? I build businesses with vision, faith in the future, in winning. You just tear things down, sad. The room crackled with energy, students leaning forward, Hargrove's smirk fading fast. Here's the kicker, Trump said, his voice booming now, commanding every inch of the space. You mock faith, but you've got your own religion going, worshipping your own brain. That's the real fairy tale, folks. Me? I believe in God, in America, in making things great. And I don't need a PhD to know what's true. I've got something better, common sense. He paused, locking eyes with Hargrove, his stare unrelenting. So tell me, Dean, who's the fool here? The guy who believes in something greater, or the guy too proud to admit he's got no answers? The silence was deafening. Hargrove gripped the podium, his face flushing red, his usual eloquence crumbling. That's not the point, he stammered, but the words sounded weak, hollow. Trump tipped his head slightly, a victor's tilt. Thought so, Dean? Thought so? The auditorium pulsed with a charged silence, Donald Trump's words. So tell me, Dean, who's the fool here? Hanging in the air like a thunderclap. The stage lights cast long shadows, illuminating Trump's unwavering figure as he stood at the edge, his sharp suit a beacon of defiance against the Ivy League's polished decorum. Dean Richard Hargrove gripped the podium, his knuckles whitening, his once smug smirk replaced by a flush of red creeping up his neck. The screen behind him still glowed with its damning graph, but it now seemed more like a relic of a crumbling argument than a weapon of intellectual triumph. The crowd held its breath, students and faculty alike caught in the electric pull of the moment, some scribbling notes, others staring wide-eyed, sensing the tide had turned. Trump didn't let the silence settle. He stepped forward, his voice rising with the cadence of a man who'd built empires and toppled doubters. Let's keep this going, folks, because we're just getting started, believe me, he said, his tone steady but laced with a fire that filled the room. You, Dean, you love your science, great, beautiful science. But you act like it's got all the answers. Tell me this, where'd the universe come from? Why is it so perfect for life? Scientists, smart guys, not like you, call it fine-tuning. Random? I don't buy it. That's faith, folks, faith in something bigger than your little charts. A murmur swept through the audience, heads nodding as Trump's words landed like punches. Hargrove tried to rally, his voice sharp but shaky. Fine-tuning? That's a tired old argument, Mr. Trump. Science will explain it. Gaps don't mean God. Trump grinned, a flash of victory in his eyes. Gaps, huh? Beautiful word, Dean, gaps. You're betting everything on those gaps closing, but here's the kicker, you've got faith too. Faith that nothing made everything, poof, out of nowhere. Sounds like a fairy tale to me. Me? I'd rather believe in a winner, a creator who knows how to build something great. The room buzzed, a few students clapping, others whispering in awe as Hargrove's composure cracked further. And let's talk about your big attack, intelligence. Trump pressed on, his voice booming now, commanding every corner of the auditorium. You say smart people ditch faith. Wrong, dead wrong. Look at history. Newton, brilliant guy, loved God. Einstein, genius, said science needs religion. Even today, top scientists, winners, believe. You think they're dumb? No, they're smarter than you, Dean, because they've got humility. You're too busy worshiping your own brain to see the truth. The crowd erupted, applause breaking out in pockets, students leaning forward, captivated by Trump's relentless logic. Hargrove's face darkened, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched the podium. This isn't a history lesson, he snapped, his tone desperate. Explain consciousness, then, where's your God in that? Trump didn't miss a beat. Consciousness? Oh, it's a beauty, Dean, a mystery you can't touch. Science can't even tell us why we think, why we feel. You think that just popped out of mud? I don't think so. That's design, tremendous design. You've got no answer, but you mock mine. Who's the fool now? The auditorium roared, applause swelling as Hargrove's argument unraveled before their eyes. Here's the real deal, Trump said, stepping closer still, his voice a mix of steel and conviction. You don't hate God, you hate losing. You hate that faith makes people strong, stronger than your fancy degrees. Faith built America, freedom, grit, winners. You think that's weak? No, it's power, real power. You mock it because you're scared, Dean, scared that maybe, just maybe, you're wrong. He paused, letting the words sink in, his gaze piercing Hargrove like a laser. So here's my question, my tremendous question. If faith is so dumb, why is it breaking you right now? The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed Hargrove whole. His mouth opened, then closed, his usual eloquence reduced to a stammer. That's not, he faltered, his voice barely a whisper as the crowd watched in stunned disbelief. Trump tilted his head, a faint smirk returning. Thought so, Dean. Thought so. He turned to the audience, raising a hand as if to say, we're done here. The room exploded, applause, cheers, gasps, students rising to their feet, faculty exchanging uneasy glances. Hargrove stood frozen, a titan felled not by force but by the unrelenting truth of a man who refused to back down. The auditorium trembled with the aftershocks of Donald Trump's words, the air thick with the roar of applause and the stunned gasps of an audience that had just witnessed a titan fall. Trump stood at the stage's edge, his sharp suit catching the light, his head tilted slightly in that victor's pose, calm, unshaken, a man who'd turned a smug challenge into a rout. The question he'd left hanging. If faith is so dumb, why is it breaking you right now? Had pierced Dean Richard Hargrove like a dagger, leaving the once proud academic clutching the podium, his face a mask of red and ruin. The graph on the screen behind him, once a symbol of his intellectual dominance, now flickered like a broken relic, mocked by the very silence it had tried to command. Students rose to their feet, some cheering, others whispering in disbelief, while faculty members shifted uneasily, their Ivy League polish tarnished by the raw power they'd just seen unleashed. Trump raised a hand, a simple gesture that hushed the crowd, not out of fear, but all. Folks, he said, his voice steady, carrying that unmistakable Trump cadence. We've had a great time here, haven't we? Tremendous. But I'm not done yet, because winning's not just about talking, it's about showing. He stepped back from the edge, his boots clicking against the floor, and turned to Hargrove, who still stood frozen, his silver hair disheveled, his hands trembling. Dean, you've got a lot of smart kids here, bright futures, big potential. Maybe next time, teach them something real. Faith isn't weakness, it's strength. The best strength. Believe me. A ripple of applause broke out again, softer this time, but no less fervent, as Trump gave a nod and started down the steps. Hargrove's mouth opened, a weak attempt at a retort forming. This isn't over. But it crumbled into a mumble, drowned by the crowd's murmur. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, a lifeline, but found none. The students who'd once hung on his every word now stole glances at Trump, their notebooks filled not with his lecture but with the dismantling they'd just witnessed. Faculty members whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others scribbling notes, perhaps to warn colleagues, perhaps to rethink their own lectures. Hargrove sank into his chair behind the podium, his hands fumbling with his tie, the weight of his defeat settling like dust over a forgotten shelf. Trump reached the floor, his stride confident, unhurried, as if he owned the place, and in that moment he did. A cluster of students surged forward, their voices overlapping. "Mr. Trump, that was incredible!" One shouted, a young woman with wide eyes and a notebook clutched to her chest. "I've never seen anyone take him down like that." Another added, a lanky kid with glasses, his voice cracking with excitement. Trump grinned, raising a hand to quiet them. Thank you, very nice, great kids. You're the future, you know that? Keep thinking, keep winning, don't let anyone tell you what you can't believe." They nodded vigorously, some pulling out phones to snap photos, others scribbling his words like gospel. At the back of the room, Professor Eleanor Klein, a graying historian who'd watched the exchange with a mix of fascination and unease, approached a colleague. "He's turned this into a circus," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. "But damn if he didn't make Hargrove look small." Her companion, a younger professor with a beard, nodded slowly. "It's more than that. He didn't just win, he changed the room. Look at them." He gestured to the students, now buzzing with energy, forming groups to dissect what they'd seen. "Hargrove's done, he'll never recover from this." The symposium stumbled on, but it was a hollow shell of its former self. Hargrove tried to regain control, shuffling papers and muttering about the next topic. "We'll move to economic theory." But his voice wavered, his authority shattered. No one cared about his slides anymore. The air crackled with the echo of Trump's triumph. As the session ended, students spilled into the halls, their chatter electric. "Did you see how he just? I've never heard anyone talk back like that. He's right, you know, faith doesn't make you dumb." The whispers grew into a roar, spreading beyond the auditorium, beyond the university. By evening, the story had legs. Social media lit up, clips of Trump's rebuttal, pieced together from shaky student videos, raced across platforms. "Trump schools Ivy League dean" trended on X, hashtags like #FaithAndReason and #TrumpWins spiking with every retweet. Professors at rival schools weighed in, some scoffing, others admitting, grudgingly, that he'd landed blows they couldn't counter. Back in the auditorium, now empty save for a janitor sweeping the aisles, Hargrove sat alone, staring at his notes. 30 years of lectures, reduced to rubble by a man he'd underestimated. He muttered to himself. "Arrogance, maybe he's right," then shook his head, the words bitter on his tongue. Trump, meanwhile, stood outside under the fading sun, the crisp autumn air brushing his face as he slid into his car. A young aide approached, holding a phone. "Sir, it's going viral, millions of views already." Trump chuckled, a low, satisfied sound. "Good, very good. Let him see it. Let him know faith's not dead, not by a long shot." He paused, glancing back at the university's ivy-clad walls. "And tell him this, I don't just talk, I win. Always." The car purred to life, pulling away as the horizon swallowed it, leaving behind a legacy that would echo far beyond that day. A reminder that when truth meets pride, truth always comes out on top.